Good morning and welcome to our Sunday morning Parsha webcast. Today being that it's Erev Hanukkah, the day before Hanukkah. Hanukkah starts tonight and tomorrow. So I'll talk about this upcoming holiday and explain it, elaborate on it, and perhaps teach you something or a couple of things that you were unaware of until today regarding this holiday. First of all, the main observance of the holiday of Hanukkah is, of course, the lighting of the menorah, the lighting of the Hanukkah candles. And this is to reflect, to commemorate the great miracle that happened with the oil, that they found that one jug of oil which was sealed, and they knew it was kosher and it was pure, and it had only a supply for one day, and it lasted for 8 days miraculously. So there's two things. Number one, and so because of that, the next year, the great sages in Israel established this as an 8-day holiday to commemorate the 8-day miracle that happened with the oil. And they established that they should light the Hanukkah candles. Now it's interesting that the Talmud, in that section where it talks about the holiday of Hanukkah, it tells us that the basic way to observe Hanukkah is to light every night one candle. One candle. If you want to be more meticulous about the mitzvahs, and do it even better, then you light every night you light a candle for every member of the family. So for example, if you have you and your wife, so you light the first night 2 candles, the second night 2 candles, the third night 2, so if you have another child, 3. So it's the same every night, but not one candle, but for every member of the family. Or that every member of the family lights his own candle. Meaning to say you have 3 people, so everyone lights one candle, you light 1 candle per member. That's if you want to do it better. And if the Talmud says that if those that are extra meticulous, beyond meticulous, you have the ones that do the mitzvah basic, 1 candle per night. Though then you have the mahadrin. Mahadrin means those are do the mitzvahs with extra meticulousness. And then you have the mahadrin mina mahadrin, those that are extremely meticulous about mitzvahs. What do? They do 1 candle the first night, 2 candles the second night, 3 candles the third night, and 4 until the 8th night you light all 8 candles of the menorah. Interestingly enough, I would say that, I'd venture to say that if you went out and met 10 Jews in the street, go today to town center of Weston and stop 10 Jews there and ask them, you light the Hanukkah candles on Hanukkah? He'll say yes. Most likely they'll say yes. Because Hanukkah somehow is observed by very many Jews, maybe more than any other holiday in the whole Jewish calendar. And you ask them, how many candles are you going to light tonight? They'll say 1. How many are you going to light tomorrow night? 2, 3, sure. She says, do you realize that you are of the group that the Talmud calls the most meticulous of the observance of this mitzvah? Right? Because that's what the Talmud says. You do 1 night the first night, 1 candle, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. It's interesting that everyone in the Jewish world today does it that way. There's no one that I know of that does it any other way. There's no one that takes the base, that does it according to the basic level or even the second level. Everyone does it in the most beautiful and meticulous way to observe, which is in observing this mitzvah, which is to start with 1, then go to 2, to 3, to 4, to 5, all the way to 8. Which is an interesting thing. I mean, if you think about it, there are 613 commandments in the Torah. You know that? Yeah. Let's take, for example, a common mitzvah, keeping kosher. Yeah? Stop 10 Jews in the street today and ask them if they keep kosher. So first of all, you get lucky if they say yes. You're lucky if they say yes. But even if they say yes, I guarantee you that not all 10 people are observing kosher at the highest standard of keeping kosher. Every mitzvah has its basic level, its higher level, higher, all the way till the mahadrim min mahadrim, the most meticulous. In every other mitzvah, let's take the mitzvah of tefillin. You put on the phylacteries on every weekday morning. Go around, look at any shul. This one's tefillin is big, this one's tefillin is small, this one's tefillin is $300 it costed him, this one costed him $500, that one costed him $1,000. Everyone does it according to his, not all Jews who put on tefillin are doing it at the highest level. They're going basic. Some do it basic, some do it a little nicer, some do it the best. And that's true with every mitzvah. There's not one mitzvah in the Torah that every single Jew who does it at the highest level of observance. And that is the uniqueness of the Yom Tov of Hanukkah. That if you're lighting Hanukkah candles, you're doing it the best way. And I'm telling you, try this. Go to any Jew. And it's not only that they don't do it any other way. They don't even know that there's another way to do it. No one even knows that there's a basic way to light one candle every night. No one even knows there's such an option. Everyone takes it for granted that the only way to light Hanukkah candles is you do every night another candle. You add every night another one, right? Mm-hmm. You didn't know there was any other way to do it, right? I assume you probably didn't either. No one knew.
Left to right.
You go left to right. No, I'm sorry. You're right. Left to right. Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah. In other words, tomorrow night you go the left one first, then the right one. Yes, he's right. But
It is well known, even not to people that are not Jewish. Everybody knows about the menorah and about those things.
And what do they know? They know that every night you light an extra candle.
Mm-hmm.
No one even thinks or knows that there's any other option. It's the only mitzvah in the Torah. The only mitzvah in the Torah. And this needs to be understood. How did Hanukkah luck out like this? So that's the question. Why is it that Hanukkah somehow became so popular by the Jewish people and even by the whole world that Jews do it in its most perfect way, with the point that they don't even know of any other option. Unless you learn the Talmud and you know that there's 3 ways to do it, and somehow this one, everyone does it the right way. So to understand this, we have to go back and discuss what it was, what is it that happened over there in the temple when the Jews went to rededicate it. What happened with Hanukkah was that the Jews were under attack by the Greeks. The Greeks went ahead and they ransacked the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, and they defiled everything. They made sure that everything was compromised, and that because there's a very specific way. There's a very specific way we worship in the temple. Whatever we use has to be of the highest standards. The oil has to be pure. The oil that we use for the menorah, if it's touched by the Greeks and touched by anyone that's not pure, it becomes unholy and so on, and you can't use it anymore. It's a problem. So the Greeks did not destroy the temple. The Babylonians destroyed the temple. The Romans destroyed the temple. The Greeks didn't destroy the temple. They just they just defiled the temple. Because what they wanted was, they wanted Jews to worship, no problem. They had nothing inherently, they had nothing against the Jews as far as their desire to observe their laws, to observe their rituals, etc., etc. The Jewish culture was something they actually had an appreciation for. They had their own culture. They were very cultured, as you know. The Greeks were very cultured. So they appreciated a culture, the Jewish culture. What they didn't appreciate was exactly this idea that Judaism, they don't treat Judaism as a culture. They treat it as a godly way of life, a godly way of life. They do the mitzvahs not because it adds a cultural beauty to their lives. They do the mitzvahs for one and one only reason, because God commanded them to do so. And they do it with such faith that whether they understand what they're doing or whether they don't understand what they're doing, they do it anyway. And there's absolutely no they don't search to question anything. Of course they ask questions and they get answers and so on, but not as a challenge. The Jews accept Torah mitzvahs for what it is. It's a godly way of life, a godly commanded way to live, and that's how they live. Not because this enhances their life, it makes their life more meaningful. That may be a side, a side effect, a byproduct. That may be true. It does add and enhance our lives, but that is not why the Jews observe mitzvahs. And let me give you an example. So let's take the oil in the temple. The Jews come back to the temple after they win the war against the Greeks. And they realize that there's no clean oil to use to light the menorah. Everything is defiled. And they're beside themselves. They don't know what to do. How are they going to rededicate the temple and light the menorah? So they begin a search. They search for good oil and they can't find anything. And they don't light the menorah. And they search further. Until finally they found that small thing of oil. But the problem with that was there was only 1 day's supply. It only would last, there was the amount of oil that was in that little bottle was for 1 day. Now here's an interesting law that most people don't know. The law is that you're not allowed to use defiled oil. Oil that's not clean, ritually clean, for the menorah. And that's why they couldn't use the Greek oil, right? There's those oils that the Greeks defiled. But did you know that the law says that if there's absolutely no clean oil, you're allowed to use defiled oil? You didn't know that. That is the law. If there's no clean, pure oil, if there's, you're stuck without anything else, instead of not lighting the menorah, it takes a long time to get pure oil. They've got to go to the olive groves and pick olives and crush them and get oil and process it till it becomes available. It takes a week. So what are you going to do? Not light the menorah for a whole week? There's a law in the Torah. You have to light the menorah every day. So what are you supposed to do? So of course you should use good oil. But if there is no good oil, you have a choice. Either don't light the menorah or light it with not clean oil. What do you choose? The Torah chooses. It says light it with not clean oil, but the menorah must be lit. So what was the problem over here? When you understand, when you know that, what exactly was the problem? So they couldn't find good oil, so you got not good oil. Take the second, a downgraded oil. That's okay, kosher. That's perfectly kosher. Or shall I say, it's kosher. But what happened? It wasn't perfectly kosher. It's kosher, but it's not perfect. It's after all, it is defiled oil. It's second grade oil. It's not the best. The best oil would be the pure oil. And when the oil was not pure, So although you're right, by legally, by basic law of the Torah, you could use it, but the Jews, after such a war and such a battle, and you have to understand what this battle was all about. This battle was not about abolishing Torah and mitzvahs. What was the battle with the Greeks? The Greeks had no problem with Jews doing the mitzvahs. And the Greeks had no problem with Jews to begin with. They liked the Jews, actually. It wasn't like the Hitler wanted to kill every Jew. Haman wanted to kill every Jew. The Greeks had no such desire. They didn't care if they're Jews and living peacefully. On the contrary, they wanted to get along with the Jews. And they didn't even care if Jews keep Shabbos and keep Torah and keep mitzvahs and put on tefillin. Because in their mindset, every people has their ways of life. Everyone has a culture. Everyone does their thing. They have their holidays, their rituals, their customs. Everyone has. The Jews, the Greeks have theirs to commemorate their battles and their victories, and they have their holidays. So they had absolutely no issue with Jews having their own holidays to mark their own victories. Right? Pesach. The Greeks had a problem with Jews observing Pesach. Why should they have a problem? Jews were in Egypt. They were redeemed from slavery, so they have a holiday. It makes perfect sense. And that's the key word. It makes perfect sense.
Logic.
Huh?
Logic.
It makes perfect sense. Anything that made perfect sense, the Jews were okay. The Greeks had no problem with the Jews. The problem is that the Jews have mitzvahs that don't make sense, that have no logic behind them. And even in the mitzvahs that do have a logic behind them, even there's a lot of it that doesn't make sense. Let me give you an example. So we talked about Pesach, right? So on Pesach we do because the Jews were in Egypt and they were redeemed from slavery. Right? So what do we do in commemoration of this holiday? We have a Seder, and we eat matzah, and we eat bitter herbs, and we drink 4 cups of wine, and everything we do, read the Haggadah and all that. Anything strange about that? No. There's nothing strange about Jew eating matzah. Why? Because we're basically remembering the food that the Jews ate when they left Egypt. Perfect sense. Anything wrong with eating mar, bitter herbs? No. It's reminding us of the bitterness of our life in Egypt. Is there anything bizarre about reading the Haggadah? No. You're telling your children the story. That's what every normal people do. They tell the story to the next generation. It's perfectly sensible.
Makes sense.
But here comes the part that is completely illogical. When you talk about eating matzah, so how much matzah do you have to eat? How much matzah do you have to eat on Pesach?
How much?
How much? On the night of the Seder, how much matzah do you have to
To
eat?
satisfy your need.
How much to satisfy your need?
Yes.
How much would that be?
More than.
How much? You don't even know, you never even
No.
thought of it. How much matzah? Like, who cares? How much? Whatever you eat. That's it. You eat matzah. Whatever you can put in, you put in. You like 2 pieces,
not a
you
limit.
take 2 pieces. You take like 1 piece, you take 1 piece. Who's getting bothered with how much?
Exactly.
But the Jews do. In the Jewish book of the Shulchan Aruch, of the Jewish law code, everything is precise. You have to eat a certain amount of matzah on the night of Pesach. How much do you have to eat? 3.5 ounce, 1 ounce, I'm sorry. At least 1 ounce, a minimum of 1 ounce. What? A half a matzah. A half a matzah. What happens if you ate 40% of a matzah? Not 50%?
You're not meeting the mitzvah.
So you didn't do it. It's as if you didn't do it. What about the 4 cups of wine? How much does each cup have to be? A cup like that? That's a big cup. Does it have to be a 3-ounce cup, a 2-ounce cup, a little shot glass? How much wine do you have to drink? There's a measure for that too. It has to be 3.5 ounces. Or 3 ounces, something like that. A revi'is. A quarter of a loig. That's a Hebrew measurement. And if you drank just under a quarter of a lug, you didn't do it. It's as if you didn't drink wine. It's as if you didn't do anything. And the same thing with the bitter herbs. You have to eat 1 ounce of bitter herbs. And if you ate it just under 1 ounce, You didn't do it. And if someone ate the whole Seder properly, and then 10 minutes after the Seder he wasn't feeling well and he threw it up. He wasn't feeling, he threw up everything he ate. Start all over again.
Really?
Yeah. You didn't know that.
No.
You have to do it all over again. Now this is the part of Judaism that rational people and people who are live their life by a certain rational code just can't make peace with this kind of attitude. What this does is it takes it out of the realm of culture and puts it into some spiritual, godly, supernatural, superhuman type of experience. You're getting caught up with, if you ate this much, it's good. If you ate just that, not good. I mean, that's already a super rational kind of thing. That doesn't make any sense. If the purpose of eating matzah is to remember what Jews did when they left Egypt, then what difference does it make how much you ate? You remembered it, you thought of it, your kids saw that you did it, it's going on to the next generation. What's the problem? But no, over here, matzah is not about remembering what the Jews ate in Egypt. Matzah is about fulfilling a commandment. It's doing what God said to do. He told us to eat matzah tonight. Oh, really? How much do you have to eat? A crumb? In other words, if the matzah is there to just remember the past, a crumb is enough. It doesn't make a deal. A little piece, whatever you eat is good. I give the example, Thanksgiving, yeah? Everyone eats turkey on Thanksgiving. How much turkey do you have to eat on Thanksgiving? The question is a silly question. The question is out of place. Who cares how much you eat? It's not a mitzvah. You're trying to remember that they're pilgrims, whatever they did. So you eat a piece of turkey, it's fine. If matzah was to remember our plight in Egypt and food that we left, a little piece is enough. But if matzah is there to fulfill a godly commandment, then you got to know what was that godly commandment. What is it that God said? You have to eat matzah. Does he mean a crumb? Can you consider a crumb eating matzah? Hardly. So there's a measure for everything. And at Sinai, God gave those measurements. Told Moses, I mean a kazayis, I mean an ounce. And today's measure would be an ounce. And under an ounce, you didn't do it. Under an ounce, you didn't do it. I'll tell you furthermore. You have to eat the Seder at the night of Pesach, right? I'm giving you examples of the Seder, so the night of the Seder. What happens if you do it 5 minutes before night's fall? Let's say night is at 8 o'clock on Pesach. And you did it 7:45. You didn't do it. Mm-hmm. You didn't do it. It doesn't count. It's like eating a Seder tonight. It's the same thing. If you eat it before 50 minutes before sundown, before the night comes, it's as if you made a Seder a month before Pesach. It's the same thing.
So on Yom Kippur, if you fast but you don't come to temple and you sleep, you didn't do it.
Well, no, Yom Kippur, there's two things. There's fasting and there's going to temple. It's two different things. Over there, it actually would count that you fasted.
But if you sleep throughout?
You fasted.
You're cheating.
You fasted. But it's not the ideal way, of course, but actually it does count. For fasting, it counts. Because you fasted. The point is that this is what what happened was the Jews and the Greeks, these two philosophies, these two ways of perceiving their mitzvahs and their way of life, where the Greeks, it was all cultural, it was all sensible, it was all rational, and the Jews, almost every mitzvah we do is super rational. There may be a grain of rationale to the reason we do it, but the way we do it becomes irrational, becomes super rational. There's a reason for every mitzvah almost. But then when you get into the details, it becomes already unreasonable. Right? I just gave you a bunch of examples. So they began, these two cultures, these two ways of life began to clash. And the Greeks could not stand that the Jews were so spiritual in that way, and that they were so godly, and they were so not human. It wasn't human. It was very much godly. It was superhuman. And that's what they went, that was the battle. They told the Jews, we don't mind if you observe a culture, but when this idea of observing a godly code of law goes against everything we understand and believe. And they tried to reason with the Jews to become a little more rational, to become a little more logical, and it didn't work, so they went to war. Once they won the war, they come back to the temple. Now let's go back to the oil. They come back to the temple, and they find that the temple is all messed up. They're ransacked, and everything is ruined over there. So they went and they tried to redo it, to rededicate it, to rebuild it, to sanctify it. So now they come and they find the defiled oil. So you're right, according to halacha, you could use defiled oil if there's nothing else. But when you appreciate what this whole battle was all about, the battle was not about rational mitzvahs. Rationally speaking, you could use this oil, no problem. But everything about this Hanukkah battle was not about doing it rationally. It was the fight was to be completely godly. The Jews were saying, no, we're a godly people, not a cultural people. So although the law is that you could use it, but once they rededicated the temple, they really had a desire to show the people that what we fought for was the holy, to be able to observe Torah mitzvahs at its best level, not to compromise one bit. And they saw using defiled oil as a compromise, even though it was a kosher compromise. It would be perfectly halachically okay, but it was a compromised oil. It wasn't the best, and this is not what we fought for. We fought for a super rational relationship with God, a relationship with Torah mitzvah that says we're going all the way. It's purely godly. This is our connection to God. It's not about the human fulfillment. It's about fulfillment of God, of God's will. And God wants pure oil. Although he said if you don't have pure oil, you could use non-pure oil, we want the best. So what does God do? He sees that attitude. He sees that they really want to serve him in the best possible way, even though on a rational level you can do it less. But they want to go super rational. They want to do it the best way, the way God, at the highest level. So God said, I'm providing a miracle for them. When he saw that desire, that total commitment to him, to the point where they were ready to give up their life, because this was a battle that they could have lost everything. They could have lost thousands and thousands of soldiers, and the miracle happened that they didn't, but they were ready to give up everything to serve God perfectly. So God said, I'm going to go along with that desire of theirs to have the best, not to compromise. And therefore he said, I'm going to let them find that little cruise, and if there's only 1 day supply, I'm going to provide them with more, till they can go and get more, which takes a week. That's why it was 8 days, because it takes 8 days to provide, to get the oil, to get the olives, and to crush them and make oil takes a week. So God said, I'll make the miracle last until they run out of, till they can produce more oil naturally. This answers why this one mitzvah of Chanukah is the only mitzvah in the Torah that all Jews, remember I asked in the beginning, all Jews do it in this most perfect way. Mahadrim mina mahadrim, at the highest level. And then Jews don't even know there's a secondary level. They don't even know that there's other options. And it's the unique mitzvah. No other mitzvah is done this way. I want you to appreciate that. The Seder. You have handmade matzah and you have machine-made matzah. You have round matzah, which is on a higher level. You have the square machine matzah, which is on a lower level. Every single mitzvah, there's different levels, and different Jews do it different ways. This is the only mitzvah that is unique, that every single person that lights the menorah lights it the best way, because it reflects the attitude and the mesiras nefesh, the total self-sacrifice that the Jews expressed in the battle of Hanukkah. So therefore, the whole battle was about doing it right. The whole battle was about completely dedicating ourselves to Hashem. So therefore, the observance of how we do it for thousands of years later also, by divine providence, played itself out in such a way that all Jews, on Hanukkah, we do at the highest level. We're not looking for compromise. The Greeks were looking for compromise. They were looking for Jews to compromise. And the whole battle was to not compromise. So so when you observe this mitzvah, you're going to observe it in such a way where you compromise. It would be a contradiction of terms. It would be a contradiction of the whole holiday. The whole holiday was about the battle to do things at the highest level, to serve God at the highest level. Even though you don't appreciate, you don't understand it, you can't make sense of it, made no difference. That's how we are. That's who we are. We're super rational people. Therefore, the mitzvah of Hanukkah is done in the highest possible way. There's so much more about Hanukkah, obviously. What time is it now?
It's a couple of minutes before 9.
Before 9. I'll tell you one other beautiful thing. The mitzvah of the menorah is to reflect the Temple Menorah. How did we have this? Why do we have the mitzvah of Chanukah? Because the Jews, because the miracle happened with the menorah in the temple. And the menorah in the temple is different than the menorahs that we light. You know that. But there's a number of differences. Number one, the menorah in the temple was always lit. It's always lit by day. It's never lit at night. The mitzvah was to light it by day. The temple menorah was lit inside. The mitzvah wasn't to take it to the door of to the outside and light it at the outdoors. The mitzvah is to light it indoors. So this is two major important differences. The difference is that first of all we light it. There's a third difference also. In the temple menorah there were only 7 candles, 7 branches. Our menorah has how many? 8. So you have 8 as opposed to 7. Day as opposed to night, because our Hanukkah menorah we light at night, not by day. And inside as opposed to outside. Correct? Even though today most people light the menorahs indoors, but they put it by the window, right? To shut but the real way, the original way that it was meant to be was to do it by the door facing the outside, the public. So why do we have these 3 differences? So first of all, I'll talk about the difference between day and night. I guess the reason for these 3 differences is only one reason. And this may sound counter to what you believe, what you thought. But believe it or not, the spiritual, what is lighting candles? What is the meaning of it? Every candle represents a spiritual light. The temple was a holy place, was a spiritual place, a place that spiritual godliness and a very high level of godliness shined in the temple. And when they lit the menorah, that godliness was represented in those lights, in those candles. Right? But the lights, the energy, the spiritual energy of the temple, although it was a very, very strong spiritual, godly energy, but it wasn't as strong, believe it or not, as the energy and spiritual light that shines through the candles of the menorah, of the Chanukah candles. The Chanukah candles that we light in 2015 have within them a godly energy that supersedes even the godly energy that was present and revealed in the Holy Temple, which was manifest and reflected through the lights of the candelabra in the temple. And that is why the temple menorah was lit by day, not by night. Because to light up, what's night? What's the difference between night and day? Night and day is darkness and light. Light is daytime is light, and nighttime is darkness. When you say to light something by night, the purpose of it is to light up a dark world. You need a lot more spiritual energy to be able to light up a dark world, as opposed to the spiritual energy that you need to light by daytime when it's already light, you're just adding light. It's one thing that you're adding light to the daytime light, as opposed to lighting up a completely dark night. The Temple Menorah didn't have the power to light up the darkness of the world. It didn't have that energy. The most it could do was bring more light to an already lit world. It was daytime. It was already light. The Temple Menorah had the power to bring more light, to add light to an already lit up world. Whereas the Hanukkah Menorah has much infinitely greater light. It has such a spiritual energy to it that it can light up even a dark world, to completely dispel the darkness of the world. That's why we're told to light it at night. For the same reason, you see, there's that second difference. The menorah in the temple is lit indoors. What indoors mean? Inside your house is your own holy environment. That's your home. It's your sanctuary. It's the place where you reflect your ideals, your values, your spiritual reality. Again, the same ideas. Over there, God says in the temple, which represents that idea of the holiness, it's a holy place. So God says, light and bring in more holiness to an already holy environment. You're doing it indoors, right? What's the temple? The temple is a holy environment. God says, bring more holiness in an already holy environment. But the temple menorah did not have this spiritual energy to be able to light up the completely outdoor foreign environment, which is what the outdoors represents. Right? What's the difference between inside and outside? Outside, winds are blowing. There's all kinds of environments, all kinds of ideals, all kinds of, it's a foreign. It's a place where everything goes. Right? In your house, you make your own laws, your own rules. It's your own havens, your own spiritual haven. The temple lights didn't have that quality to be able to light up a dark world or an outdoor world. It brought an additional light to an already lit up time, that daytime, and more light to an already spiritual environment, the holy temple. Chanukah Menorah has both. It has the power for both, to light the outdoors, which is an environment that's completely foreign to godliness, and even at night. It's a double negative. It's outdoors and night. Imagine that. It's one thing to contend with an outdoors by daytime. It's another thing to contend with the outdoors at night. It's a double darkness. That Hanukkah has that power. Why so? If Hanukkah has 8 candles, not 7. You know the difference between 7 and 8 is? How many days did God create the world?
6.
7, really. But Shabbos is 7. The natural cycle is 7. 7 years, 7 days, everything is naturally. The natural order is 7.
You would.
Huh?
7 times 7.
7. Everything is 7. The supernatural is 8. Right? The number 8 represents that which is supernatural. It says in the Spheros, there's 7 spiritual, there's the 7 Sphirot, right? With which God created the world. That represents the natural reality. The supernatural is represented by 8. That's why the bris is done at the 8th day. All the Jewish holidays are 8 days, and so on and so forth. So Hanukkah has 8 candles because it has within it a supernatural power. That's why it's able to light up a dark world, it's able to light up an outdoor world, and that's what Hanukkah is. And that's what the victory over the Greeks were. The Greeks wanted to bring the Jews down, keep them in a natural reality, in a rational, natural reality. The Greeks fought for the supernatural. That's why God provided a miracle for 8 days, not 7. Because 8 represents that supernatural reality. And that's why it has that power to light up an outdoor world and light up a darkened world. So this is very important to understand what Hanukkah is. It looks like a benign type of, it's like candles. It's not, lacks the spirituality of Pesach. Could you compare Hanukkah to Pesach? Pesach, you stand the Seder, you wear Shabbos clothes, you're not allowed to, it's like Shabbos. Although that's true, but Hanukkah has within it something that no other holiday has. God told Aaron the high priest, when Aaron was feeling dejected, when it says when the temple was dedicated, all the tribes brought sacrifices for 12 days, right? And he saw this, and the tribe of Levi, his tribe, didn't do it. So he felt like less. He felt like he didn't have that advantage. So God told him, don't worry, your service, what you do, is even greater than what they do. Why? And he said, you light the menorah. Why is that better? Why is the menorah better than the Mizbeach? They offered sacrifice on the Mizbeach. He lit candles in the menorah. What's the difference? So God told him, because the menorah candles, although the temple may be destroyed one day, but they will continue to be lit through the Chanukah candles. It's everlasting. It's everlasting.
Amen.
It's eternal. That's what Hanukkah is. It's eternal. The temple was destroyed. Hanukkah candles were not. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week and a wonderful Hanukkah.
Thank
That's
you.
the main thing.
Thank you, Rabbi.